Hey man, what's with this brutal passage in Joshua chapter 6?
What's the problem?
Well, in verse 21 it says the Israelites captured the city, and then they devoted all in the city to destruction, both men and women, young and old, oxen, sheep, and donkeys, with the edge of the sword.
Right.
I mean, maybe you can make an argument about the men and women being evil enough to be devoted to destruction, but young? Which would include infants and children?
Yes, it would.
That's pretty gross for God to approve of this.
Sure, but let's go back. What's the story leading up to this moment? Let's jump quickly back to chapter 2.
Okay?
Joshua sends 2 spies into Jericho to scout it out, and they meet this prostitute named Rahab. She takes them in and hides them and even lies to protect them. But she says something interesting to the spies in verse 9. She says, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who are beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath."
Okay, so the Israelites conquered other people groups before this.
Yeah, so let's go back even further. Rahab says they heard about what Israel did to the 2 Amorite kings.
Right.
So that's King Sihon and King Og. These stories are found in Numbers chapter 21.
Okay.
It mentions how Israel sent messengers to King Sihon saying, "Let me pass through your land. We will not turn aside into field or vineyard. We will not drink the water of a well. We will go by the king's highway until we have passed through your territory." But let's put this in perspective first. God had a covenant with Israel. God is the creator of the world. Every inch of land on earth belongs to him. The kings, the rulers of these lands, are only there because of God. Romans chapter 13 makes this clear when it says, "There is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God." So essentially what went on here was these Amorite kings took over this land from another group called the Moabites by force. And there's a poem in Numbers 21, verse 27 through 30 that illustrates this. So here in Numbers 21, we have the children of God basically saying, we have the right to pass through your land, and we're going to do it peacefully, whether you like it or not, because the land belongs to God. And don't worry, we're not going to use any of your resources, and we won't stay. The verse says they'll pass through their territory. But instead of fearing and trusting God and his word, the way Rahab did in Jericho, the king decides to retaliate and attacks Israel upon receiving their message. God gives Israel victory, and King Sihon is defeated. Israel ends up taking over that land.
Okay.
Then we get into the whole conspiracy with the sorcerer named Balaam, who was hired by the king of Moab named Balak to curse Israel because he was watching them have victory after victory and figured they were next.
Right.
So basically, all this could have been avoided if King Sihon just would have let Israel pass through his territory peacefully. Again, these people knew who Israel was. Word got out about what God did for Israel at the Red Sea. God gave these kings a chance to take an action of faith toward him. It was Rahab's obedience that saved her. She's in heaven right now, according to Hebrews chapter 11.
Really?
Yeah, it says, "By faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies." But to bring this all back to Jericho, and also to tie back in this idea of God having the right to uproot nations and kings or tell them to leave their territories, that's what we're seeing here in the book of Joshua.
What do you mean?
Well, God instructs Joshua to have his men march around the city of Jericho for 6 days, and then on the 7th day to march around it 7 times.
Right, then they shout and play their trumpets, and the walls come crashing down.
Exactly, but why the theatrics? What was with the marching around the city?
Good question.
I believe it was God saying, "You guys know who I am, you know what I'm capable of, and I'm showcasing my people so that you see every inch of them. They may be few, but they're regimented, they're willing to carry out my will even if it doesn't make sense to them, and so where's your action of faith in me?" And he was giving them 6 days to respond. I mean, think about it. They literally said there was no man alive within Jericho who wasn't fearful of Israel. They knew what God was capable of. They knew what he had done to the other kings and nations, yet their response isn't faith, isn't submission. Why couldn't they all have reacted the way Rahab did? It says her entire family was spared because of her actions.
That's interesting. So these people could have responded in faith and been saved by God in these situations.
Exactly. God had a sovereign will and mission with every right to occupy any space he wanted. But what we see here in this narrative is God's willingness to let them respond in either support of Israel or be destroyed.
Yeah, but it is kind of sad that little babies were killed in it all.
It's true, but it just goes to show how our disobedience to God affects those around us, even our children. Like I said, Rahab's entire family was spared because of her obedience and faith.
True.
So this is where the whole fear of God is the beginning of wisdom thing should become the forefront of our attitude. When God is literally telling you that he has the ability and right to destroy you when you're standing in the way of his will, you can choose to be a hero and stand your ground like a mosquito against a T-Rex. Or you can have faith and be welcoming like Rahab. Look what happened to Nineveh in the book of Jonah, lifelong enemies of Israel, who were steeped in wickedness. God gave them a warning, and they listened to God and were spared. I think the themes here are fear God because there's good reason to. Don't act like fear is a dirty word because it's actually healthy if it motivates us to make good choices. Humble ourselves in the presence of someone who can destroy us. Also acknowledge that we don't deserve mercy, and then have faith that welcoming him into your life will be for your benefit and the people around you.
That's the gospel message right there, ain't it?
Sure is.